The MCU and Star Wars are two media franchises that have been in the Disney umbrella for some time now. And in that some time, they have each declined in quality and increased in quantity. Most of the problems I have with these declining franchises are shared between the two, and it's happening precisely because they are both owned by Disney. The formula being used by Disney in these franchises works so well that the problems with it are even beginning to trickle into Pixar's territory too. Let me explain. Disney cannot help themselves. They believe they have found the key to having the highest profit floor in a media franchise, as well as an ever-expanding profit ceiling. And it's exactly why they won't stop doing it. It's also exactly why we haven't gotten anything truly great from either franchise in a while. But what is the key? What is the it that they're doing? Well, there are a few of them. And a lot of the time, they overlap. Backstory and lore, and nostalgia, callbacks, and Easter eggs. So if this is the key and this is the formula, how is it a problem? Because, just like many of the fans, Disney can't get enough of it. And when they can't get enough, everything else besides that formula takes a back seat. This means the plot, the execution, the emotion, and the growth of the characters themselves all become less important than the cameos of other in-universe characters and the Easter eggs that call back to a past character or event, or the ones that hint at some future character or event, which is not at all the same as foreshadowing. These things are more quantifiable in the MCU, but are quickly showing up more and more in the Star Wars universe as well. Backstory and lore. These things by themselves aren't a problem, but it's how Disney uses them to incorporate other characters, provide nostalgia, and tease the future that is the problem. In the MCU, backstory and lore are not often the sole basis for movies or TV shows. Black Widow is a rare example of an MCU movie that at face value is supposed to give backstory to a character. But in reality, this movie is really just a vehicle to introduce Yelena Belova, Black Widow's sister, as a future threat to Hawkeye in his own Disney Plus series, and later on, probably a much more prominent character. Black Widow as a character does not grow in this movie because she doesn't change between Captain America Civil War and Avengers Infinity War, which is when this movie takes place. This movie masquerades as a sister story or a story about family, but really is only used to tease future MCU events. Even though every Marvel movie teases something for the future, it is different now than it was in, say, Phase 1. Iron Man is the best example of this. It's a movie that not only teased bigger things for the MCU, but it also provided substantial character growth for Tony Stark. More and more, though, we are seeing less of this type of character growth in Marvel shows and movies, and more never-ending setup for whatever the next MCU saga ends up being. In Star Wars, backstory and lore are very quickly becoming the main focus of Star Wars media. Movies and TV shows centered around backstory and lore and filling in the gaps of the Skywalker saga are popping up more often. There's the Clone Wars, Rogue One, The Mandalorian, Obi-Wan Kenobi, Ahsoka, Solo, The Book of Boba Fett, Andor, and even an upcoming Lando series as well. Do we really need this much backstory? Do we want this much backstory? The Clone Wars and Rogue One get a pass because they were both done very well. Solo and The Book of Boba Fett are mediocre at best, not only due to their execution, but also because they are completely unnecessary. The Mandalorian was at its best in its first season before it got wrapped up with the characters from the Skywalker saga and got even worse within the events of The Book of Boba Fett solely because that show, which was supposed to be about Boba Fett, became The Mandalorian Season 2.5. Obi-Wan Kenobi is an average series, which could have been substantially better. The Ahsoka, Andor, and Lando shows have not yet released, but I can guarantee they will fall into the same category of average or mediocre, just like the others. If Disney actually spent more time on a single project than multiple in the same universe, maybe things would be a lot better. Because not every gap needs to be filled. Not every character needs a spin-off, whether as a prequel or a sequel. Not everything needs to be connected directly. But they can't help themselves. Earlier, I said that the problems within the MCU and Star Wars formula were trickling into Pixar's territory too. And I ask you to look no further than the upcoming movie Lightyear. Have there been Toy Story spin-offs before? Yes. Did they focus on Buzz Lightyear? You bet. He's a fun and cool character that is a fan favorite in the Toy Story franchise, but people were not asking for this. Disney, writing off the success of Toy Story 4, decided to keep the franchise alive by making another Buzz Lightyear spin-off, the previous two of which were supposed to be his backstory. And if Lightyear succeeds as well, which it probably will, how many Easter eggs or callbacks will there be in the movie? How much nostalgia? When this does happen, and it will, do you really think they will finally let the Toy Story franchise rest? Nostalgia, callbacks, and Easter eggs. These three things have become staples of the MCU and Star Wars in the last several years. So much so that there is not a single piece of media within these franchises that doesn't have one. There's always some connection to another piece of media already within the franchise. Star Wars has not always been this way, at least nowhere near as bad as it was in the MCU. In the MCU at first, it was almost always a thing that came at the very end of the movie, in the mid or post-credit scene. But now it's happening during these movies and also after. I have no beef with post-credit scenes and teasing a future movie in them, but when they are plugged into the plot of the current movie and serve no other purpose than being a cool moment, that's where I have a problem. Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness is the most recent Marvel project that is guilty of this. Fans have been clamoring for a new Fantastic Four movie, especially one that has John Krasinski as Reed Richards, and guess what? He's in the movie! Hooray! This is all they want. This moment in the theater when you see him and go, oh my god, that's Reed Richards. And now, an idea has been placed in your head that there's going to be a Fantastic Four movie and that John Krasinski has been cast in the lead role. In this same movie, they do something similar, but instead of teasing a future movie, they call back to another one, the X-Men. They are so obsessed with doing this that they even teased this cameo in the trailer for the movie. Surprise! Professor X is back. And just like Reed Richards, the character appears only to provide spoken exposition and also to be a quick, cool moment. These characters, along with the other cameos, are swiftly murdered by Wanda. Some may say that these appearances are used to show how powerful Wanda really is, but we already know how powerful she is. I get that it's important to show how dangerous the villain of your story is, but there are much better avenues to do this than using nostalgia and Easter eggs. Spider-Man No Way Home is the most guilty movie in the MCU in terms of nostalgia bait. But it does, to me, get a slight pass because they do give some much needed closure to Andrew Garfield's Peter Parker, and they also give Tom Holland's Peter Parker some pretty substantial character growth. Now, is there too much nostalgia bait in this movie? Yes, for sure. But did they pull most of it off? Also yes. This is not the case with Doctor Strange 2. And honestly, I'm worried that the multiverse will only make this kind of thing worse. As I said earlier, Star Wars is less guilty of using nostalgia, callbacks, and Easter eggs in their content. But recently, Star Wars has become more MCU-ish than ever. The movie Solo was one of the first Disney Star Wars projects to fall into this kind of category. Not only do we get background to a character we did not need it from, we also discover the origins of the name Solo, the Millennium Falcon, the gold dice that hang inside of it, the relationship with Lando and Chewie, and also a cameo by Darth Maul. This is a bad movie that pretends to be backstory and instead is meant to provide nostalgia and small cool moments for Star Wars fans. There's a reason that the most memorable moments from this movie aren't about the plot or even about Han Solo himself, because the story and the character took a back seat to these nostalgia baits that are planted throughout the movie. Nostalgia is also one of the biggest reasons why the sequel trilogy was a complete misfire. Well, that and the lack of any actual story planning for it. But even despite the sequel trilogy being a dud, the Skywalker saga in Star Wars is not going to end anytime soon, even though some upcoming Star Wars content might not directly involve a character called Skywalker. Unfortunately though, the Obi-Wan Kenobi limited series has these moments too. In the first episode, Obi-Wan leaves scraps of a toy for Kid Luke. And surprise, surprise, it's the same toy Luke plays with in A New Hope. It masquerades as this moment that's supposed to show us that Obi-Wan still loves and cares about Luke, despite every person watching already knowing this. And instead, it's just like the gold dice from Solo, an Easter egg for fans to point to and say, oh my god. At the time of writing this script, 4 of the 6 episodes have been released. And through 4 episodes, I really feel underwhelmed. Nostalgia bait is not the main reason why I'm underwhelmed by this series, but it certainly does not have a good impact. I have many more thoughts about this series, but for now, I will leave it at that. The most clear example of nostalgia bait in recent Star Wars media, though, is The Mandalorian Season 2. For a show that started off mostly separate from the Skywalker saga, aside from when it takes place, it really does devolve in Season 2. Not only do we get cameos from Boba Fett and Ahsoka, both of which are meant to kickstart their own personal series, but we also get one from, surprise surprise, Luke Skywalker! This kind of bait overshadows everything else about the show, but people will still watch, and so will I. Like many examples I've used so far, there are reasons why this is being done within the stories, but at this point I seriously don't believe it is possible for Disney to create any kind of media that is within the Star Wars universe, but also separate completely from the Skywalker saga. And to me, that's a big problem, because it's cheap. In conclusion, the Marvel and Star Wars universes are continuously expanding, but they aren't adding anything new. What's holding Disney back from making something actually great in these universes is not the universes, it's themselves. Disney and MCU and Star Wars fans alike love these nostalgia and Easter egg moments for different reasons, but each is equally responsible for why these two franchises can't seem to put together a truly great story anymore. Disney loves their money, and too many of the fans give it to them because of the quick feel-good hits of nostalgia that are constantly planted in these franchises' media. I am also guilty of giving Disney my money, but Disney is doing the same thing with their own classic movies. Why do you think they keep creating unasked for live-action remakes of their classic movies? The answer is simple: nostalgia and money. I will leave you with 2 questions. Can you realistically picture the MCU or Skywalker saga ever truly ending? And if you can't, do you picture the quality of the two improving? That's all I have for today. Thanks for watching.